with her speech, beginning your speech. Jennifer.
While I'm getting my stuff up here ready, Patty passed out everyone a card with a word or a phrase on it. And later in my speech, I'm going to ask everybody to do a little research on the internet on their phone. So if your phone's turned off, if you could take it out and just get it ready for that. I'm going to be turning my stuff on, so give me a moment. Imagine this scenario, and it's not going to be very difficult to imagine. It's late Tuesday evening, and your confidence builders meeting is wrapping up. And we are looking at confirming the agenda for next meeting. And there's not a speech on the roster. And you really don't feel like you have time to give a speech, and you're kind of sitting on your hand so that you don't volunteer. But suddenly your hand shoots up and takes on a life of its own, and before you know it, you're on the roster to give a speech next week. And Wednesday rolls around, Thursday, Friday, the weekend's over, you find yourself on Monday evening, you have to write a speech. What's the hardest part of that? Thank you. I believe and agree with Monica that it's getting started. It's finding that discipline, it's mustering up the courage, creating the quiet space, just to sit down and get going. So when I was getting started on this speech, I knew I had to choose one from either the Better Speaker or the Better Club series to fulfill my requirement for my next award. I wanted to choose something that would be important for our club. And I feel like we need to do more speeches here. So if we could all get some tips and tricks and really an arsenal of weapons to tackle that fear of just starting our speeches, that will really benefit our club. But what is the criteria for a successful speech opening? I want to give you 2 possible speech openings for the same speech. I want to see what you think about which one is better. So here's number 1. VICTORY! Victory, victory, victory! Unfortunately, that was my audition in high school for the cheerleading squad, and as you can probably guess, I did not make the squad. But I think this is a good story to talk about because there's a lesson in it. From this experience, I learned how to cope with failure, overcome it, and find out what I was really good at. And I think that's something that everybody could relate to, and especially if we have kids experiencing failure for the first times in our lives. This story is going to benefit them, so I hope you enjoy it. So that's number 1. Here's opening number 2 for the same topic. Well, I just want to start out by saying I didn't prepare much for this speech. I think the easiest thing to do is to tell a story about your life. So tonight I'm going to tell you about the time I tried out for the cheerleading squad and didn't make it, and how I learned to deal with failure from that experience. So what do you think was the better opening? The first one. So according to Toastmasters, criteria for a successful speech opening is, number 1, get the attention of the audience. Did I get your attention?
Yes.
Yeah, I was kind of awkward and silly and I jumped around, but I woke you up, which is a good thing. And did I introduce the topic?
Yes.
I even told you why the topic was important and how it could relate to your life. So hopefully I got your buy-in. And did I establish rapport? And then finally, a good speech opening rule of thumb is that it should take less than 5 to 10% of your total speech time. Now, when I was first starting Toastmasters, I was pretty diligent and I worked very hard on my speeches, and I wrote them out and I timed them and I practiced them, and I always found out that I had too much material, but I just talked faster because I was so tied to that material and so proud of that material, I didn't want to get rid of anything. But what happened? Things happened. At the old room, the loudspeaker would go on. You always use more time than you anticipate. So I ended up cutting my conclusion short or going over time and not having a powerful conclusion. So you've got to kind of get rid of that mentality and learn to edit. Shakespeare said that brevity is the soul of wit. So edit and learn to keep those introductions brief. There are so many opening techniques for speeches that this speech will introduce. So next time you sit down to start a speech, you're just going to have one of many to choose from. But the first one is to state the importance of your topic. Tell your listeners why they should listen to you. And I think that I did that in that speech opening that you preferred. So get their buy-in. Let them know why they should listen. The next opening technique is to make a startling statement. Example here is smoking kills. More Americans die each year than were killed in battle during World War II and Vietnam together. So pretty startling, right? More people die from diseases related to smoking than in major world wars. In school, did you take chemistry?
Yes.
No?
Mhm.
Do you remember much?
No, I just remember this chart that I memorized.
Did you take algebra?
Yes.
I think one thing, unfortunately, that we all learned in school, and nod your head if you agree, is we learned how to be physically present, because unfortunately a lot of it didn't pique our interest, but to be in mind somewhere else. And so assume that's the case with your audience. I always like to be woken up because I find myself in a daydream a lot of times, and I appreciate that. Wake your audience up. Give them some startling information. Do something different. Do something unique. Get them out of that stupor, because we've all learned to go there, and assume that about your audience. Another opening technique that you might want to play with is to arouse their curiosity or suspense. Create a little mystery. I'll give you an example here. Who am I? I live with you. I'm your best friend. When you're not home, I love to borrow your shoes, and sometimes I return them in not such good shape. I hate it when you leave the house, but when you come home, I dance around in circles. And maybe the fact that I ruined your shoes has something to do with you leaving. So, who am I introducing in that kind of mysterious opening?
The dog.
My puppy, right, my puppy. So you can create a little suspense that way, but don't go on too long with that. Remember, you do want to introduce your topic pretty early on. You don't want your introduction to be overly heavy-handed or overly long to take up the time of the rest of the speech. Tell a story or an anecdote. Mark Twain said, write about what you know, and we should speak about what we know too. Number one, if you've procrastinated and waited to the last minute, talking about what you know really doesn't entail any research, right? And number two, an interesting speaker is an authentic speaker. And what material can you be more authentic about than your own life story? However, just a caveat, when you use an anecdote or a story in an introduction, be careful again not to go on too long, because our stories are something we know well and something we can talk for a long time about. We don't want to go more than 5 or 10% of our speech. So apply the edit rule. Listen to Shakespeare. Brevity is the soul of wit. And another opening technique, ask a rhetorical question. So why is this good? That's a rhetorical question. But it begs an answer, right? And then it creates that rapport with the audience. You're not just up there speaking and bringing that people to that familiar place where they were when they were in school, maybe daydreaming, maybe not present in the mind, only physically present. So anything that invites interaction with your audience creates rapport and creates participation, and you know that they're with you. Just be careful. I think I used a rhetorical question early on in the speech, and I didn't allow enough pause time. Monica wanted to answer, and I kind of interrupted her. So when you do that, pause a little bit and give people time to answer. You can also begin with a quotation. Great way to begin a speech. A quotation can add authority to your speech. It can amuse the audience and dramatize a speech point. So now I've given everybody a card with some kind of random phrase or topic. Where do you get quotes? There's a lot of good websites on the internet that have quotes. One of them I like is called brainyquotes.com. So everybody, if you can go on the internet on your phone, go on your phone and look up your word or phrases, and let's share some of the quotes that we find there. Raise your hand when you got one. That's good. Rita,
Sushi is taking over the world?
who's that by?
It doesn't say.
Oh, okay. And what was your word or phrase?
Sushi.
Anybody else have one? Monica?
Frankenstein. He's alive.
Okay.
I have one for chamber music. Oh, what did I do? A Beethoven symphony should be rehearsed like chamber music, only for a lot more people. Andre Previn.
Okay. Donna, did you find one?
I'm using my other phone.
Oh, okay. How about you, Judy?
Down the sword when Virginia wanted the sword. I gave her one. Now she sends me a dog and require bread.
Doug, did you get one?
Still working on it.
Okay. Well, some of those topics I gave you were pretty random and obscure, and I purposely chose random and obscure topics just to show you there's a quote for everything. I think I even gave someone pumpkins, and I looked that up on Brady Quotes, and there was a Henry David Thoreau quote on pumpkins. I can't remember what it is. You don't have to use any particular of these techniques to open a speech. You don't have to use a quote, but I recommend when you choose a speech topic, looking at some quotes. It can get your creative juices going, and maybe you don't want to open with a quote, but maybe you want to weave a quote into your speech body or maybe your conclusion. But just looking at some quotes on your topic could help you get some ideas and some inspiration.
I got one.
Plenty out there. Doug, what
I
do you
got
got?
one. It's on greenhouses. Growing hemp as nature designed it is vital to our urgent need to reduce greenhouse gases and ensure the survival of our planet.
There you go. There's even a quote on that. Donna?
A ballerina. A ballet dancer is a person who practices this art of classical ballet. Both female and males can practice ballet, however, dancers have a strict hierarchy and strict gender role. They rely on years of extensive training and proper techniques to become a part of a professional companies.
Is that a quote or?
That's Wikipedia.
That's Wikipedia. Okay. Wikipedia is another good place to quote from.
I so I found out about Santa Claus. I stopped believing in Santa Claus when I was 6. Mother took me to him in the department store and he asked me for my autograph.
Who's that by?
Santa Claus.
But who is that by?
That's by Santa Claus.
No, Shirley Temple.
Oh, Shirley Temple.
Oh,
Right. And yet another opening technique is to reference the occasion. I could have started out and I had Monica, her introduction of me, reference the fact that this speech marks my almost getting to my competent communicator silver. But if you're doing a speech for an occasion, everybody that is there for the same reason, it's a good way to acknowledge shared purpose and to create rapport with the group. For example, we've had meetings for specific occasions. We had a meeting where we honored Marion, our club founder. And that's definitely a technique you'd want to consider for a speech like that. Other techniques are humor. Everybody loves a joke. And again, that's a way to establish rapport, loosen up your audience and wake them up and invite them in with you. And audience participation, same thing. Demonstration, the old adage, if you can show rather than tell, show. And reference to a historical event. Okay, we've talked about some of the good things to do. There are things to avoid. You want to avoid acknowledging lack of preparation, or if you prepared a lot, you want to avoid talking about that. So fake it till you make it. If you didn't prepare, use it as an opportunity to hone and test your skills for doing impromptu speeches, but don't let the audience know about them. Don't let them see you sweat. And avoid being dull and boring. Avoid delaying mention of the topic. We talked about that one technique where you can create some suspense and mystery, but you don't want to go on too long with that and confuse or lose your audience. So in conclusion, a dynamic beginning is essential for a successful speech. Donna's still looking up quotes, so I have a quote for you. Eleanor Roosevelt, what did she say? Do something every day that scares you. Some of us have been at Toastmasters longer than others, and we're not necessarily scared of public speaking anymore, but I think we're all scared of the work and the time commitment it takes to do a speech. But remember, Toastmasters and our fellow club members are sounding boards. We've got to throw off that mentality that we have to be perfect, that our speech has to be wonderful, that it has to be written out, that we have to come up here and perform and knock everybody's socks off. We don't need to do that. We just need to begin and get feedback from our fellow Toastmasters. And I know people in the club, I know Jeannie, you've done this before where you give a speech once, you get the feedback, you give it again, and you make it better. I think we need to adopt that mentality where we're not scared that we need to be perfect, so we need to have the right amount of time. We just need to start. That's the hardest part, and I hope this presentation from the Better Speakers series has given everybody some ideas on how to get started, on how to overcome that fear. To save trees, I didn't print out the PowerPoint, but if you want to review the material more in depth, go to Toastmasters International and you can download the whole series. So thank you, I appreciate your participation today.